Hi, I'm Ellen from the Chili Dog. I'm working on my swaying palms shawl, and although it may not look like it, to minimize the amount of yarn tails you'll need to weave in at the end of the project, this design utilizes simple Intarsia knitting. Intarsia is a colorwork technique where blocks of color are knit with separate bobbins or balls, in this case, of yarn. And no yarn is carried across your rows of stitches. For example, while I'm working my swaying palms shawl, I always have two balls of yarn attached to the project, but I'm only going to be knitting with one of them at a time. The two stitches along the sawtooth edge of the shawl are always worked in the ecru main color. The body of the shawl is either worked in my coordinating green color or in the main color. To avoid any gaps or holes along the vertical line where the color change happens, the two yarns must be twisted around each other in every row on the wrong side of the fabric. In this lesson, I'll demonstrate how to make the twist when you change from one color to the next, both on the right side and the wrong side, how and why you're going to make the twist when you continue with the original color on both the right side and the wrong side. And if you're knitting this pattern, make sure to stay tuned to the end because I'll demonstrate how I recommend working row 19 and 20, the rows at the top of the sawtooth. So you can reposition the green contrasting color yarn and set up for the next sawtooth and don't have to cut and rejoin that color. Let's get started. Before we begin, if you enjoy our videos, consider joining the pack and becoming a member of thechilidog.com for ad-free access to our entire learning library, priority support, and more. On the right side, I've worked the stitches in my main color and am ready to switch to the contrasting color. Before I do, I need to twist the yarns around each other so that there won't be a hole in my knitting. I'm looking at the right side of my fabric. Both yarns are at the back on the wrong side of the fabric, and I'll twist them a half twist counterclockwise around each other so that when I knit my next stitch, the main color yarn is going to be trapped in between the contrasting color and the next stitch that I form. So I'll let that main color just hang out of the way, and then it's trapped when I form my next stitch. Now I'm on the wrong side of my fabric. I've worked across the stitches in my contrasting color and am ready to switch back to the main color. Again, I'm going to need to twist the two yarns around each other before I continue on so there's no hole in my fabric. This time, I'm looking at the wrong side of my fabric, and both yarns are here at the front and also on the wrong side. Again, I'm going to give them a half twist counterclockwise around each other so that when I work my next stitch, the contrasting color is going to be trapped in between my main color yarn and the next stitch. So I just let that contrasting color yarn hang out of the way and then trap it by working the next stitch. I'm on the right side, and my next two rows are worked completely with the main color. However, I'll still need to twist the two yarns around each other so that I don't end up with a long, loose vertical strand of the contrasting color that could potentially snag and it wouldn't look nice. Just like when I change colors on the right side, I'm looking at the right side of my fabric. Both of my yarns are at the back on the wrong side. Just like before, I'm twisting counterclockwise, but instead of a half twist, I need to make a full twist so that when I let go of the contrasting yarn, it's just going to hang there and it will be trapped in between my main color and the next stitch. So I'll just let that contrasting color hang there out of the way, and then it's trapped when I work the next stitch. On the wrong side, it's the same idea. I've worked my main color yarn until I get to the contrasting yarn here. I need to make a twist to prevent a snaggy, unsightly vertical strand. I'm looking at the wrong side of my fabric. Both yarns are on the wrong side, and I twist counterclockwise. But instead of just making a half twist counterclockwise, I need to make a full twist counterclockwise so that when this strand of the contrasting color is just hanging there, it's going to be trapped in between my main color yarn and my next stitch that I'm forming. And the yarn is held in place. This next part of the lesson is somewhat specific to the Swaying Palms shawl pattern. I don't want to have to cut and rejoin the contrasting color for each of these little teeth along the lower edge of the shawl. So I'm going to use the same principles of the basic Intarsia color change to reposition where this contrasting color yarn is over to a new point for the next tooth. If we look at the wrong side of the fabric, you can see that this repositioning process creates an almost invisible transition. So for row 19 of the pattern, I'm going to work the first 2 stitches in pattern. So I'll slip with the main color and then knit with the main color. To reposition the contrasting color to its new place, I'm going to make that Intarsia type twist before the next stitch 11 times. So for the first one, I'm going to need to do a full twist so that I can trap that contrasting yarn. So that's 1 twist. For the remaining twists, I'll only need to do a half twist to trap the contrasting yarn. So that's number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Making those twists twisted the yarns back over each other. Before I continue knitting the rest of my shawl, I'm going to want to untwist those yarns so things don't get tangled up. And if we look here on the wrong side, you can see that the contrasting yarn is just going to hang here out of the way as I work my row in between the 12th and the 13th stitch on my knitting needle. On row 20, which is a wrong side row, I've worked all the way across back until I get to that dangling contrasting yarn. It's in the proper place for the next sawtooth, but I still need to make that Intarsia style twist to avoid creating a loose vertical strand. So I'm going to twist counterclockwise a half and then a full rotation so that I am trapping the contrasting yarn in between the main color and the next stitch. I'll make my stitch and then just leave that contrasting yarn dangling there and finish out the row with my main color. I hope you enjoyed learning how to do a simple vertical Intarsia color change. If you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your knitting friends. If you'd like to try this technique in a pattern, head over to the shop section of thechilidog.com and look for our Swaying Palms shawl. Until we stitch again, happy knitting!